Alright, well, I really liked talking about Little Shop of Horrors in that one video I did. I didn't really do it for any money or any success, but it was just a nice little cathartic exercise to do. Well, I wonder how that video did. I haven't checked it in a while. Oh. Oh, wow. You people really liked that, huh? Well, it's been over 6 months. I guess I should probably do another one. What movie should I talk about? I know, a video game. Welcome to Filmprov, where everything is made up and my opinions don't matter. Now I know this is a film channel, but I'd like to talk for a second about my favorite video game series, Uncharted. The series began in 2007 with the game Uncharted Drake's Fortune. The series consists of 4 main series games, 1 PS Vita game, and 1 spin-off game. The series follows treasure hunter and thief Nathan Drake as he travels the world in search of historical and mythological artifacts and treasures, often retracing the footsteps of historical explorers and treasure hunters, as well as battling a rotating roster of various villainous bad guys and enemies. Now, some of you may remember, or some of you may actually not remember, that there was a movie adaptation of this game series that was released in early 2022. Starring Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg, the film Uncharted released to decent box office returns, enough to warrant a possible sequel, but more noticeably, a very mixed to negative reception from critics and audiences, but the most vocal detractors were definitely fans of the game, who found this to be one of the worst adaptations of any media ever. Now, I was a fan of the Percy Jackson books and Avatar: The Last Airbender, so I have a lot of experience with bad adaptations, so I gotta say, this one's not good at all. It's hard to watch this movie as someone who has not played the games at all and is just coming this with fresh eyes. So, if you were to just look at it as a normal film, I can see how it would be fairly inoffensive. It's a fairly forgettable movie, but I can't help but look at it through the frame of someone who's experienced the games and knows the lore and is familiar with the series. In my opinion, it actually is very valuable and informative to look at this as an adaptation and not just an independent movie. Adapting a video game into a movie is very difficult. It's not impossible, though, at least as far as I believe. Video games are widely regarded as being, how they say, cursed, with bad adaptation after bad adaptation. In fact, video game movies have been around since before the 21st century. However, it hasn't been until the last 5, maybe 10 years where we've gotten video game adaptations that are at least tolerable. Now, these are usually restricted to the more child-friendly games like Pokemon with Detective Pikachu, or the Sonic the Hedgehog series, which isn't exactly an adaptation of the games and more just the character, to the Angry Birds movie, which, yes, phone games do count as video games. However, it's hard to say that we've gotten a universally beloved and critically acclaimed video game adaptation until 2022's The Last of Us, which, coincidentally, was based on a game that was made by the same developers as the Uncharted series. So I decided I'm going to take a look at the Uncharted games and the Uncharted movie and figure out where exactly they went wrong and figure out why this movie fails to live up to its original source material. So if you want to know why video games are so difficult, you have to really look at what video games are. Video games started as simple games like any other, except on the TV, like Pong is basically air hockey, Mortal Kombat is Rock'em Sock'em Robots, first-person shooters are essentially laser tag or paintball. The story was always either simple or non-existent in early games. As games became more and more of a narrative medium, more people have tried to replicate them into film but failed. Now, if you ask me, Uncharted is one of the best-suited games for film adaptation. The biggest challenge facing most video game adaptations is the interactivity of the games. The entire premise of video games is that the player's input via the controllers determines how the player character moves, operates, what they do. As a result, there's a lot of variability, from side quests to character customization to choice-based alternate endings. For most games, every individual player will have a slightly different experience. Everyone's score in Pac-Man is different. Nobody has the same Pokemon team. Nobody does the same side missions in Ty the Tasmanian Tiger. No one has the exact same custom classes in Call of Duty. Even in a cinematic story-driven game like Mass Effect, the player character Commander Shepard can either be an absolute Boy Scout or the goddamn Punisher.
You need to relinquish your weapons before we proceed.
I'll relinquish one vote. Where do you want it?
Uncharted has a distinct advantage in that the level of interactivity is far lower. The player assumes the role of Nathan Drake, a character with a defined personality and appearance. You follow a story that is already scripted out, and you are offered really no choices. The only level of choice the player has is how specifically they take down the endless enemies. In the major story beats, the player either just watches the cutscene, or presses a single button when prompted to trigger the next scripted event. Now this isn't a bad thing necessarily. The games are intentionally designed this way because they were consciously trying to replicate a movie, except a movie that the player is right in the middle of. The games use grand set pieces, pulse-pounding action, and well-defined and likable characters that you can see in a well-made action-adventure movie like Indiana Jones or The Mummy, and each game gets progressively more and more cinematic until we get to the fourth game, which gives us compelling character drama and an introspective dive into the development of Nathan Drake as a person. Now, when it comes to adapting any medium into a film, what determines success, in my opinion, is not necessarily faithfulness to the text, but faithfulness in spirit and feeling, combined with the obvious of just being a well-made movie. I mean, this can be done by keeping it faithful to the text. Everything from To Kill a Mockingbird to Holes are considered great because they're very faithful to their original books and give the viewers the same feeling as the books. On the other hand, something like Jurassic Park takes massive liberties and deviates significantly from the book in story and character, but it captures the same themes and ideas, as well as the thrilling tone from the book, on top of just being a solid movie in general. The fucking D&D movie plays pretty fast and loose with some of the lore of the Forgotten Realms, but I'll be damned if that movie didn't perfectly capture the feeling of playing D&D with your friends. So with Uncharted, I really don't care how faithful it is to the story and lore of the games. I don't mind that this is a new story that doesn't follow any one specific game, or that it makes changes to the backstory of the characters. What is important to me is that it captures the same feeling that I get when I'm playing the game. That gritty action mixed with globe-trotting adventure that I would describe as Indiana Jones meets Die Hard. Now, how I'm going to start is by assessing what the key elements are that make Uncharted a good and memorable game. Not specific lore or storylines or plot threads, but general elements, and comparing them from the games to the movies. Because while the movie is free to do whatever it wants, there really is no excuse for the movie to ruin or fumble the elements when the games had them perfected. Now these elements, I would say, are A, the characters and relationships, B, the action and spectacle, and C, the mystery and adventure. Now starting off with the characters and relationships, the characters and relationships completely miss what makes Uncharted great in my opinion. Starting with our lead hero, people say that Tom Holland is too young to play Nathan Drake, and I don't think that's really it. Holland was 23 to 24 at the time of filming, which is on the young side, but mid-20s is not a bad age to be at when Nate has his first big adventure. However, as a mid-20-year-old, Holland still just is too youthful in his energy.
Yeah, this girl is totally flirting with me.
What?
There, the woman with Mancada. Look, she's flirting with me. Hi.
He really seems to struggle with the maturity and grit that you expect from a young man who grew up on the streets and is becoming a rugged and scrappy treasure hunter. Part of that, he really just can't help. He has a boyish face and a youthful voice to him. That's why he's so good at playing a teenage Peter Parker. But Nathan Drake has just a completely different vibe as a character.
Man only interested in the climax. He must be a real hit with the ladies.
Never had any complaints.
The only similarity between the two is really just action man who says funny things. There are actors out there the same age as him, or even a couple years older if you want to go maybe 26 or 27, who much more easily sell that more adult and mature presence. Holland can certainly quip and flip like Drake, but he lacks the confidence and experience that makes Drake a memorable character.
Hey, look at this lamp. It's covered in Mongolian script. It must have been a gift from Kublai Khan.
It says in the journal, trust in your fellow man, for one shall go to heaven, the other to hell. So, if heaven's up there, then hell has to be around here somewhere.
What's more, they miss so many aspects of his character and personality that are quintessential to Drake as a person. We don't really get his drive to prove himself and make a name for himself as Drake's heir and an explorer in his own right. However, the film adds confusingly pointless new elements, like him being a bartender or loving bubblegum.
Bubblegum?
That's my last piece. Let's split it.
Or you can just go with the Bubblicious. Jesus.
No, it's just bubble yum.
Now, when writing characters, especially in, adventure or action-based media, you're often told to pick a small handful of superpowers that your character has. Not necessarily like a superpower like shooting lasers or flying, but just a skill that your character has that gives them an edge and makes them stand out in the story.
What is it exactly that you bring to this?
I'm a planner. I make plans.
You've already made the plan, so...
If the existing plan fails, I make a new plan.
So you make plans that fail?
No,
He also plays the lute.
not relevant.
For Nathan Drake, it would probably be his encyclopedic knowledge of history and his athleticism. He's not the best fighter or combat expert in the world, but in terms of just being able to run, jump, climb anywhere, he pretty much beats anyone else. Now, the film does nail his historical knowledge. I mean, Nathan Drake is a bit of a history nerd, and Tom Holland really sells that.
Very cool, but the legend said there are 2 keys, one for the captain and one for the crew, so no one man could steal the gold by himself.
But I mean, come on. It misses his motivations for being a treasure hunter, that passion for solving mysteries, and desire to leave his mark on history just like his supposed ancestor. Now, if they want to base his motivations on finding his brother, that's fine. The games do feature lots of other, more specific motivations in the stories, like rescuing a character or stopping the bad guys from using the treasures for evil. However, saving his brother feels empty as a motivation to the audience because we barely spend any time with Sam. He and Nate break into a museum. He gives some of the worst exposition I've ever heard in my life.
But lucky for us, we got pirate blood in our veins. Descended from Sir Francis Drake himself. At least that was what Mom and Dad used to say.
And then leaves. The film has one scene to try and build a relationship with Nate and this non-existent Sam, on top of trying to build a relationship between Nate and Sully, and a relationship between Nate and Chloe, and that's really just too much for one movie. Another big problem with Drake is that ultimately the film focuses on the wrong point in Drake's life. Now, I said I'm fine with him being a 25-year-old, but what I mean is that his stage in his development is off. Nathan Drake is a fantasy character. He's someone that every guy wants to be, like James Bond or Indiana Jones. He's at his most interesting in his prime. Now, it can be early in his prime, sure, but still in his prime. Maybe he's had some adventures before, he's been around the world, he's gotten in some fights, he's used a gun a few times, he knows how to fight, he's found a couple valuable trinkets and treasures. Nothing as big as this. We can still see his first big adventure, but we want to see a Nate that's at least a little bit world-weary.
You always been this popular?
Well, I do seem to attract the scum of the earth.
We like to see Nate when he's had a few adventures already, when he's a bit worldly, a bit experienced, a bit more confident. Because from there, we get to see Nate be a little cocky, be a little bit of a show-off, be a little bit of a smartass.
Okay, mango.
What are you on about?
Oh, it's my safe word. Found the ships, though, didn't I? You couldn't find your own ass with both hands.
And a map.
Oh, careful now. Wouldn't want you to melt.
We want to see a Nathan Drake that's in over his head, but won't show that he's in over his head.
You just jump, count to 5, and pull the cord. How hard could that be?
When we drop in on his literal first adventure, what seems to be his first time ever leaving the US at all, we end up sitting here waiting for this kid to become the character that we all know and love, instead of following the character from the start. There's a reason the games don't spend much time on Nate's early development. We have a couple levels of flashbacks where we see him as a kid, either when he and Sam are breaking out of the orphanage or when he first meets Sully. But when we first meet Nate as a character in his earliest adventure, he still at least knows what he's doing enough to be an interesting and engaging character.
Yeah, so unless you want to end up in a Panamanian jail, we should probably handle this ourselves.
Well, what's worse?
You obviously haven't been in a Panamanian jail. Do you know how to use one of these?
Even when we see Nate as a kid, he's still fairly competent. He's able to effectively pull off a heist. Meanwhile, in this movie, we have mid-20s Nate, who doesn't even know how a radio works.
He's threatening to kill me.
Don't touch your ear like that. You look like an idiot.
And I gotta say, this feels like more of a nitpick, but still I think is important for getting Nate right as a character, that Sam's lighter, or even just the bubblegum, is given more screen time and more importance than Francis Drake's ring, which is one of the most important parts of Nate's design and his backstory. They don't even say the ring belonged to Francis Drake. That is how unimportant it is. It is given to Nate in the beginning by Sam, and that's it. They mention Sic Parvis Magna, meaning greatness from small beginnings. They never say that that was the motto of Francis Drake. They never say that the connection to Francis Drake is what drives Nate to be a historian and a treasure hunter, to want to follow in his footsteps and find the hidden treasures in the world. They literally give one line of exposition.
But lucky for us, we got pirate blood in our veins. Descended from Sir Francis Drake himself. At least that was what Mom and Dad used to say.
And that's it. He doesn't tell anyone else, not Sully, not Chloe. He doesn't mention it as part of who he is. That's it, nothing. We see the ring just on his body, and that's it. Alright, now, while I have heard people defend Tom Holland as Nathan Drake, and I can kind of see how he could be a Nathan Drake, by far and away, everyone agrees the worst part of the casting is Mark Wahlberg as Sully.
That's not true. People love me.
Wahlberg is just not Sully in any way, shape, or form. He doesn't have the grit, the wisdom, or the pithy phrases.
Know what I love about partying with a bunch of crooks?
What's that?
Nobody cares if you smoke indoors.
He doesn't have the fatherly loyalty of Sully.
Why are you here, Victor?
Because somebody's got to keep an eye out for him.
No mentorship or partnership between them. He's literally just Marky Mark.
Plus the other ship, plus the value of the ships themselves, which you can't even put a price on. Thanks a lot. You almost got me killed. Where's the gold? Is it under the tree? Is it in the tree?
Mark Wahlberg is good in comedic roles, or if you put him with a talented director like Martin Scorsese or Peter Berg. His skill set is being more high-pitched, neurotic, insecure, slight anger problems.
I am a peacock! You gotta let me fly!
None of that is Sully. Sully is calm. Sully is experienced. He's wizened. He always has some folksy saying.
This is like trying to find a bride in a brothel. This is phony as a $3 bill. I'm sweating like a hooker in church. That and a quarter will get you 25 cents.
They couldn't be bothered to give Mark Wahlberg Sully's trademark mustache and cigar, which that's far from the most important part of the character, but it just shows how little effort they really put into transforming the actor into the character that we all know and love. Safe to say, Sully's probably the most popular fan-favorite character in the Uncharted series, and he is just completely unrecognizable in this movie.
You're a dirty old man, Sullivan.
Uh-huh.
Our third, I'm going to say protagonist, but not really, is Chloe Fraser, who is another character from the game, and she is honestly a waste of time.
One day I found a bronze statue covered in gems buried under a bridge. I'll never forget the feeling, you know?
She's a letdown both as an adaptation of the game character, but also just as a character in general. She lacks any of the femme fatale flirtatiousness with Nate. I mean, Chloe is basically Nate's Catwoman.
You might have warned me.
And missed the look on your face? But admit it, you're gonna miss this ass.
The two barely have any chemistry or intimate scenes together. I mean, Chloe is a hardcore flirt, especially with Nate.
Hello. Well, so much for foreplay. Oh, is that an ancient Tibetan ritual dagger in your pocket?
Oh, maybe I'm just happy to see you.
She's supposed to be a darker mirror of Nathan Drake, someone who matches his drive and grit as a treasure hunter, but is just one step down on the darker path for him, just slightly less moral.
He is as good as dead already, and so are we if we don't go now.
Then go.
Yeah, nobody's stopping you.
She's everything that he would want in a love interest, but not necessarily what he needs, which is highlighted in Uncharted 2 when Chloe and Elena are together.
And maybe save the world?
The world doesn't care. You stick your neck out, you are asking to lose your head.
Chloe in this is just a woman who is pretty. She comes in really, really late into the movie. She spends maybe a third of her time stabbing the characters in the back, and then she just leaves before the third act. Like, she's just gone. She doesn't come back. She doesn't play a part in the climax at all. She really doesn't even play a part in the movie at all, aside from just being a person there for Nate to talk to.
The captain left one final clue, and Sully seems to think that Sam knew what that clue was.
She just leaves, and then that's it. She's just a waste of screen time. And really, not just Nate and Chloe's relationship, but The entire dynamic between the characters is wrong. I partially chalk this up to the fact that none of the three protagonists knew each other beforehand, which that can work if you're going for a found family angle like in Guardians of the Galaxy, but they aren't, because the characters spend most of the time stabbing each other in the back and they don't even end together as friends. In every single one of the games, at least one of Drake's companions knows him already. That gives us a place of dependability and reliability in someone that we know and trust, while we get to know the new character, who's often a vessel for the audience to learn the exposition about Nathan and the world he's in. It also allows for more variation and diversity in the characters' relationships with each other. There's very little difference in Nathan getting to know Chloe, who's a stranger, with getting to know Sully, who's a stranger, versus getting to know Chloe while he already knows Sully and they're already friends. And honestly, the entire relationship between Nate and Sully is just wrong. Nate and Sully's relationship is one of the emotional through lines of the game. By the time you get to the third game, you really realize just how important Sully is in Nate's life.
I hit 40, I figured I was never gonna have a son of my own. Then you came barreling into my life.
But this movie just torpedoes it, and I point the finger at the fact that they meet each other as adults. Sully is and always has been a father figure to Nate. He took him in at a very low point when Nate had essentially no one and was a young teenager, and he's the one who essentially taught Nate everything he knows about treasure hunting, stealing, fighting. But he also filled an important hole in Nate's life, giving him not just family, but also someone loyal who he can depend on. Even when they retconned his backstory in the fourth game and created the character of Sam, Sam is established as someone who is very unreliable. He was in and out of prison, he would have to go and leave Nate. Sully was someone that Nate could depend and count on. And later in the games, we see that Sully genuinely cares for Nate.
Why are you here, Victor?
Because somebody's got to keep an eye out for him.
And often is a voice of reason for him.
You got your pride all tangled up in this thing. It's making you reckless. I taught you better than that.
In the movie, Sully is just some guy at a bar who offers him a job.
So this is what you do? You stumble into bars trying to pick up an accomplice?
These two don't have a father-son dynamic. They're just two adults, two grown men who go on an adventure together and then become kind of friends later.
We better get small, or in your case, smaller.
Hey, you're only like 1 inch taller than me, max.
When Sully took Nate in, he did it out of genuine concern. He saw this kid who was essentially a throwaway and took him under his wing because he saw great things in him and wanted to help him reach his full potential.
You got talent, but you got a lot to learn. You stick with me and I'll teach you a few things.
Here, Sully just picks him up because he needs an extra set of hands for a job.
I got a job coming up, a big one. I need another set of hands on it.
That's why it's not surprising when Sully betrays Nate more than once. There are just way too many betrayals in this movie in general. Sully betrays Nate twice, Chloe betrays Nate 3 times, Nate betrays Chloe, and Braddock betrays Moncada. Yet another reason why the character relationships feel so thin is because we never get enough time for them to solidify before they're just broken again by another betrayal. Some of these betrayals between the heroes happen way too late in the story for there to be any reconciliation and still be narratively satisfying. Around the 2/3 mark through the movie, Nate finds out that Sully essentially lied to him about his brother's death, and this is the breaking point that causes Nate to end his friendship with Sully. Now, he says he'll still stick with him and see the treasure hunt through to the end, but after that, they're done. At no point in the third act do we really see why Nate would ever change his mind. We are given no reason for Nate to still stick around with Sully as a partner after this. By the time they find the treasure and inevitably lose the treasure, to Nate, Sully is still just a guy who got his brother killed and lied to him about it. Sully really does not do anything to earn that trust back. As for the actual villains, the betrayal of one villain against the other is really nothing new to Uncharted, but this one just feels hollow. In Uncharted 2, Lazarevich kills Flynn because he was frustrated with Flynn constantly being outdone by Drake, and he is consistently shown to be ruthless and intolerant of incompetence.
Jesus.
Oh, Harry.
What's the matter, mate? Disappointed Lazara bitch beat you to it? I'm afraid you just missed him.
In Uncharted 4, Nadine betrays Rafe because she sees the downward spiral that his obsession with the treasure is causing, and how it has cost her the lives and loyalties of all of her men.
Oh, I'm just leaving.
Whether you die or not, I don't really care.
Even in the first game, which is probably the flimsiest, Navarro kills Roman because Roman doesn't know the secret of El Dorado, and Navarro believes that Roman is in over his head and he wants to claim it for himself. Now, in this movie, Willow kills Zorro here because... reasons?
You know, it was really unclear.
There literally is no reason for her to usurp him, aside from just the writers being unable to resist adding yet another betrayal to the ever-growing list. Thankfully, this film has a fairly short cast list, so I'm done going through the characters. But I'm not done with the movie. The action and spectacle of the movie is completely underwhelming, and sometimes it's even non-existent. Now, the games, they're formatted to have a series of ground-level action, mostly gunplay with a little bit of hand-to-hand combat, mixed in with big set pieces. This could be anything from quick-time events, to having to dodge or escape collapsing buildings or bridges or what have you, to big blockbuster events like the train derailment or the plane crash. The film has almost no big set pieces. There is the plane scene, which is taken from Uncharted 3, but it's a lot shorter than the game, and it really kind of comes and goes. Then, there is the flying ship scene, which, when I saw it in the trailers, I thought it was the dumbest thing I've ever seen, and I was just completely given up on the movie. But I gotta say, after sitting through the entire movie, it's the only part of the movie that has any life to it. It's dumb. It's completely ridiculous having two 500-year-old ships flying around with helicopters, but goddamn if it's not the most engaging action set piece of the entire movie. Now back to the plane scene though, it really does look like it should be Uncharted. When you put it on the poster or on the DVD cover, it looks very reminiscent of the cover art of Uncharted 3, but it feels a lot more hollow. The scene again is very short, and in it, Nate only feels like a passive participant in it. The difference between the plane scene in the movie and the plane scene in the game is that in the game, the scene is not only longer, but is a lot larger in scope and in escalation. Now both scenes start with Nate sneaking onto a cargo plane, and both feature Nate deploying the chutes on the cargo crates to take out the bad guys. But in the game, the scene starts with him sneaking onto the plane, which is already a fast-paced, heart-pumping scene. Then we see him sneaking onto the plane, eventually getting found, fighting his way to the cargo drop. Then he deploys the chutes while he's fighting through the entire plane's worth of enemies, and then it ends with Nate getting back on and then crashing the entire plane. Now this is something that Nate does all the time in the games. Whether it's a train, a plane, an entire convoy of trucks or boats on more than one occasion, Nate usually serves as a wrench being thrown into the gears of the villain's entire operations, bringing them to a catastrophic halt. Something that would play so well in a movie, but is just missing. In addition, the movie is just bloodless and the action is too tame. Now in the games, Nate is a mass murderer. I've read that in all 4 games, Nate kills over 1,000 people. Now that obviously is part of gameplay. Obviously, games are supposed to last a lot longer, so you have to go through a lot more enemies, and because of ludonarrative dissonance, you don't really register in your brain that these are people I'm killing. So there's really no way that the movie would have near the same body count as the games. But an important aspect of the games is the gun and combat play. It's what sets Uncharted apart from Indiana Jones or National Treasure. I mean, I described it earlier as Indiana Jones meets Die Hard, because such a big element of it is the action. If you look at all 4 of the main games, Nathan is holding a gun in all of them. Tom Holland waits until an hour and 37 minutes into the movie. An hour and 37 minutes into a 2-hour movie before picking up a gun and firing it. Hell, the first gun we see at all is an hour into the movie. The entire reason why the Uncharted villains usually have Nate facing a small army of enemies is because Nate does go through them. In this movie, we get maybe 15 guys max, which seem to be more or less the same guys he's facing the entire movie, because he just doesn't take them out. And this isn't really important, but it's just another thing that doesn't make sense. But if the squad of bad guys is so small, why do they need this massive airdrop? In the games, the airdrop is because it's an entire army of enemies that are driving days into the Rub al Khali desert. They need the resupply. This is just a couple boats full of guys who seem to only need to drive, a couple hours or so. Now, when I said the film is bloodless, I mean it literally. In the scene in which Braddock betrays Moncada, she slits his throat with a knife, and there is no blood. Now, the film is PG-13, so it's fine for it not to be super bloody or gory. But if that's the case, then just keep the severed jugulars out of frame. In the X-Men movies, Wolverine hacks and slashes through guys, but we don't sit there and focus on the gaping wounds or lack thereof. The games had no problem with this. They showed a moderate amount of blood.
That's my blood. That's my blood. It's a lot of my blood.
And then they kept their T rating. Not only does this film show the dead body with the neck in plain view, but it features 7 separate shots. This is a small point to nitpick, but it takes the viewer out of the movie so hard. Because when you slash someone's throat, the thing that kills them is blood loss. How are you going to sell that when you are blatantly showing us just a little line of what looks like ketchup drawn on his neck? Okay, I've talked about the characters, I've talked about the action, but the other thing that sets Uncharted apart for me is the mystery and adventure. The treasure hunt in this movie feels just all wrong. We are first introduced to the treasure with a map in a museum that Kid Nate and Kid Sam try and steal. The map shows up later in Sully's apartment. Now this is completely in keeping with the Uncharted games. Ancient artifacts found in museums and private collections, kicking off adventures, is completely par for the course. Games 2, 3, and 4 all involve artifacts stolen from collections that hold secrets to the treasure hunts. But this map is never seen or mentioned again. It doesn't have any clues or secrets, it's just a map. So why did we introduce it as if it's part of the inciting incident? Why were Nate and Sam trying to steal it? Why is it important that Sully has it? It's a waste of time. And when you're condensing a 3 to 12 hour game into a 2-hour movie, time is valuable. The artifacts that actually are important to the story are a journal that is obtained off screen, a cross that is obtained off screen, and a second cross that is only stolen a quarter of the way through the movie. And what's more, the treasure itself and the lore around it just feel lame. In the games, we get to retrace the steps of famous explorers, and a little bit at a time, unravel the mysteries of these lost treasures.
I think it is.
Drake's Lost Diary. This was written by Marco Polo. It's not just any book, wise ass. It belonged to T.E. Lawrence. You know, Lawrence of Arabia.
I was a member of Captain Henry Avery's crew. You know who that is?
He was a pirate.
The pirate who pulled off the biggest heist in history and got away with it.
There's a sense of weight and importance to each one that's built up over the course of the stories. Just look at the way each treasure is described.
Ho ho ho. El goddamn Dorado.
Terrible cargo we carried from Shambhala. The curse of the Chintamani. Marco Polo found Shambhala. Shangri-La.
You're joking.
See, after the war, Lawrence said that if he were ever to go back to Arabia, it would be to search for this place he called the Atlantis of the Sands. Now, the legend crops up over and over again under different names. Ubar, Aram of the Pillars, the City of Brass. But the story is always the same.
Well, city of immeasurable wealth, destroyed by God for its arrogance, swallowed forever in the sands of the Rubel Khali Desert.
We found Libertalia.
Whatia?
Libertalia. Seems Avery founded the legendary pirate colony.
It's more of a pirate utopia, really.
Okay, but what about the treasure?
They kept it all in one common treasury building.
Now this goes all the way back to the Indiana Jones movies, and the way they built up the importance of the treasures.
Where the cup that holds the blood of Jesus Christ resides forever.
The Holy Grail, Dr. Jones.
Good God. Yes, that's just what the Hebrews thought.
Now what's that supposed to be coming out of there?
Lightning. Fire. Power of God or something.
Do you believe, Marcus? Do you believe the Grail actually exists?
Compare that to the Uncharted film.
How much gold? Today's dollars? 5 billion easy.
It's the biggest treasure that's never been found.
This treasure is given a flimsy backstory, and The characters have nothing more than legend says to go off of, and it's never even mentioned where all this gold comes from. It's not even named beyond just the gold or the treasure.
About finding that gold.
They hid the gold.
Find the gold. We found the gold.
The games typically revolve around uncovering a story. The story of these historical figures finding these lost treasures, and why they ended up hiding them, or why they were lost, only for there to be some kind of twist that you don't realize has been built up over the entire story. Whether this be a curse or a dark secret or something like that. This is perfected in the 4th game with Libertalia, when it's revealed that the pirate captains who founded the colony betrayed and killed each other one by one over the treasure, mirroring the path that the Drake brothers and their enemies are following down themselves. Now, what do we get in this movie? Nothing. It's literally just a bunch of gold sitting on ships that was hidden for reasons that aren't clear by historical characters that we don't know or care about. Not only is the lack of twist or mystery about the treasure a missing element that makes the games unique, but it could have provided an easy layup for a character arc for Nate. Games 1 and 2 are arguably the simplest when it comes to Nate's development and story, but both these two and Game 3 all feature a bit at the end, right when Nate is starting to not care about finding the treasure anymore and ready to call it quits and go home, when he figures out the dark secret of the treasure and realizes how dangerous it would be in the wrong hands, and that gives us a moment where Nate's good nature shines through and he resolves not to give up and save himself, not to take the treasure for himself, but to do the right thing and destroy it to prevent the game's villains from using it for evil. It's such a simple and basic storytelling trope, and yet this film can't even get that right. Also, the hunt itself feels disappointing. These games are full of secret hidden tombs and temples, where you have to use enigmatic clues to solve elaborate puzzles or avoid traps. It's nothing particularly difficult for the player, the answers are usually in the journals, but it adds to the spectacle of the games, and it allows you to refer back to those ancient journals from the old explorers, further making you feel like you're retracing their steps. It also harkens back to older treasure hunt movies. We all remember the moments where Indiana Jones used the headpiece to the Staff of Ra to find the entrance to the Well of Souls, or the numerous cool and interesting clues found by Nicolas Cage in the National Treasure movies. This movie, it only has one series of puzzles in an old tomb, but they're so simple they really feel like nothing.
But there's literally an arrow that points this way.
It just boils down to sticking the crosses into a series of holes, and that's it. Until you reach a room where there's a bunch of salt with a map in it. No ancient mechanisms, no traps, nothing. Just use the keys to unlock things until you find the map. What is this place? Who built it? Don't know, don't care. After this, which is halfway through the movie, the only moment of puzzle solving is done when Nate is sitting at a table in an air-conditioned room, spinning crosses on a piece of paper. Which, the fact that he does this in a hotel room really speaks to the lack of epic scale and the sense of adventure you get. Now, this series is called Uncharted. As such, we travel across the world to beautiful and exotic locations. Jungles, mountains, deserts, islands. South America, the Pacific Islands, Indonesia, the Himalayas, France, Arabia, Italy, Madagascar, Scotland. Each place has their own unique landscape and identity. You also get moments where you get to experience the cultures. Not much, but you still get to feel like each place is a different country with different culture and a different identity than back home at the US. Now, this movie goes through 3 major locations. It starts at a black tie event in New York. This isn't terrible. It clearly is taking inspiration from the black market auction in Uncharted 4. However, this is in the middle of Manhattan, which is a far cry from a grand, breathtaking estate in rural Italy. It feels a little underwhelming when Nate and Sully escape by just hopping in an Uber and driving a block or 2 away. Then, from New York, we go to Barcelona, which is better. Lots of old world romanticism, grand architecture, and old historic churches. Although it's still in the west, so not great for a second location. We start exploring some old medieval churches, and then a Papa John's in an underground rave. Come on, man. We're exploring ancient catacombs that are centuries old, and yet we're bombarded with product placement and EDM. And by the way, if you're gonna waterboard us with a fast food chain, you couldn't at least make it an Easter egg for the fans and do Subway?
Subway, where winners eat! Ow!
That would have at least gotten a chuckle out of me. Moving on, we go to our 3rd and last location, and finally we go somewhere away from Western modernity. We go to the Philippines, and yet we never actually see the country itself. We get some scenic shots of the coast, and then a goddamn American resort. Come on! We're finally in another hemisphere, and we cannot escape white people. It's like the movie is allergic to immersing you in foreign cultures. At least it gives us the Nolan North cameo, which...
What the hell happened to you two?
Fell out of a car that fell out of a plane?
Huh. Hey, you know, something like that happened to me once.
Does that imply that this exists in the same universe as the games? Was there a Nathan Drake before this? Is this Nathan Drake? I don't know, it just raises more questions than it answers. Alright, so we figure out where the treasure is from our 5-star hotel. Now it's finally time to get to the actual treasure. And it is the most underwhelming part of the entire movie. There's no temples or ruins or anything. No puzzles, no traps. Just a hole in the rocks that leads to 2 ships. I mean, look at the reveal shot itself. When you look at the reveal shots from the games, beautiful. Then, this is the movie. Look at all the negative space, making the 2 ships seem so puny and underwhelming. Now, you can make a ship feel like a grand reveal. In fact, later in the movie, they make the ships feel incredible. But this, the grand reveal, feels so lame. Oh, well, once you get on the ship, the treasure's impressive at least, right? Wrong. In fact, we don't even see the treasure in its entirety. We see 2 barrels of gold. 2 barrels. That's it. And those are only on 1 ship. There's an entire ship that we don't even see the inside of. And this is supposedly the biggest treasure that's never been found, and this is all we see of it? Again, the games did this exact thing, and they made the simple choice of having the gold just there in the ship, piled up Scrooge McDuck styled, and it was a lot more satisfying. Hell, even the National Treasure movies made a dramatic reveal with their piles of treasure. This movie has spent its entire runtime making everything less epic than it should be, and it culminates in the most underwhelming part. Now, these aren't the only things wrong with the movie. There's just some random things that bugged me while I was watching it, but are fairly inconsequential. The focus in these 2 shots is really weird, and I just don't like it. Not only does Nate have forced running gags with the bubblegum and the lighter, but Sully has this weird running gag with his new cat. Except, the cat is last mentioned at the 40-minute mark, and then not again until the end credit scene. Also, maybe it's that the games are 16 years old, but the prevalent use of smartphones takes you out of the timeless adventure a bit. I mean, the games only featured phones very briefly and only in the later games. When you combine the smartphone use with the EDM and the Papa John's and the 5-star resort, it really just makes the film feel stuck in the 2020s.
You have so many apps open. What is wrong with you? Tinder? Really?
I own that.
And also, putting crosses together like 2 compasses to find the treasure makes no sense. Wouldn't there be 2 points where they meet? How does Nate know it's one spot and not the other? Also, just like, why did they replace the Nathan Drake theme? They didn't use the composers from the games, which, like, I kind of get, but also not really, because Henry Jackman composed the score for the 4th game, and he does film scores. Or you could go with the guy who did the other 3 games, Greg Edmondson, who was probably a lot cheaper than Henry Jackman. But they didn't. Okay, that's whatever. But the new guy just made up his own theme. Now, music feels superfluous, but when you have characters with established themes and leitmotifs that fans know and love, it becomes jarring when those themes aren't played, or are replaced with other themes that are less recognizable or less memorable. This is literally how a crowd reacts to an orchestra about to play the Nathan Drake theme.
2 small words, Nathan Drake.
However, the theme is in the movie. You hear it once when Nolan North makes a reference to him being Nathan Drake.
Whoa! What the hell happened to you two?
Which again confirms my theory that he is the real Nathan Drake, and that these are all in the same universe, and this is just some other guy, and that all the original games are canon. And then you hear it another time at the end of the movie when Nate finally puts on a shoulder holster and uses a gun. Honestly, the fact that they have the theme in the movie at those only 2 moments is just insulting, because I really love the theme. The theme is awesome, and I really wish it was in there. Anyway, so that's Uncharted. It's not the worst movie. Again, if you just take it as it is in a vacuum, it's a perfectly bland, generic, and forgettable treasure hunt movie. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Obviously, I would love for it to be a great movie, but if you want to have just a bland and generic movie that isn't connected to the Uncharted games, why would you name it Uncharted? When you look at The Last of Us, that is a series that was made by people who love the games and wanted to adapt the game. The Uncharted movie is a movie that was bounced around from writer and director to writer and director for 16 years. Development of this began after the first game in 2007. Mark Wahlberg was originally slated to be Nathan Drake. I myself have read a script by David O. Russell. It wasn't that good, but it was at least recognizable as Uncharted. This is just a movie that was made by Ruben Fleischer, who's very clearly just a rented director that plays well with Sony. I mean, he's the guy who made Venom. That's a nice soulless movie. I still believe that Uncharted could make a great movie. In fact, I even wrote an Uncharted script myself. I'm not going to say it's great. I mainly did it both as a writing exercise, just to improve my own screenwriting abilities, and also just as a proof of concept to prove that you can indeed make an Uncharted script. I just don't know what happened with this one. This one is just so underwhelming. It's really just a wet fart of a movie, and the Uncharted games, which again are my favorite games, deserve more than that. They deserve the respect that something like The Last of Us got. And I don't know. I'm at the part of my script where I didn't really write an outro, so I'm just kind of riffing right now. Honestly, guys, don't watch the movie. Don't bother. Go and play the games yourself. You can buy the restored Nathan Drake collection on the PlayStation Store. You can get Uncharted 4. If you don't want to play or you don't own a PlayStation, you can watch the cutscenes on YouTube, and it's basically just an extended movie. I mean, Uncharted 1, just the cutscenes, is about 2.5 hours. That's a movie right there. 2, 3, and 4 obviously are a little longer, but if you want to experience the story of Uncharted and the character of Nathan Drake and Sully, that's what you should do. And also, while you're on YouTube, you should subscribe, like this video, hit the bell icon if you want to get notified. Turns out I like talking about movies, and you people seem to like listening to me talk about movies, so maybe I can make this more of a regular thing for me to do. I don't know, I do have a lot of ideas for movies to talk about. Might, I don't know, talk about Jurassic Park 3, or why I don't like the Mandarin twist of the Iron Man 3, a lot of 3 movies. I want to do a full retrospective of lost tapes from Animal Planet. I don't know, I'll figure it out.